Hi there, I'm Tracy Ann Burgess and welcome to the Change Channel. Thanks for joining me again today. Yesterday, as you might recall, and it doesn't matter if you weren't here yesterday, but if you were, you might recall that we were talking about change and your response to change. And we were talking about journaling about what you're wanting. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but today we're really focusing on independence and why independence is so important in the change process. So we could start by identifying a little bit about what sort of change you're in the middle of. I mean, obviously you're in the middle of some sort of change, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So you might be either in the middle of a big change process that was somehow put upon you without any of your own doing. Something big, significant might have happened that was kind of out of your control, or maybe had something to do with it, who knows. Or you may be really wanting fundamental change in your life and that's why you're here. When you are in the middle of change, the particular type of change that I'd like to talk about today is when you are trying to keep all of your kind of everything balanced in your life. You know, you've got your relationships in place and you've got your career in place and you've got your maybe your life partner, you know, you've got your children maybe, you've got your parents maybe, you've got other relatives, and then you might have a business, you've got your career, you've got all these things that you're balancing in your life all the time. And then sometimes you can find that some of these things suddenly or slowly over time kind of start to unravel, or they just crash altogether, and you can have a whole collision of things go on, which is kind of disastrous. I can relate to it. And your immediate response is to actually try and replug everything back into its place, right? Like, oh, I'm not getting along very well with so-and-so, oh, let's just make that good because I don't have time for all that sort of drama. Or, oh, you know, my business isn't doing very well, and oh, look, I've got to quickly plug all that back into place. Or something's going on, your primary relationship is out of kilter and you've got to try and like put that into place. Because let's face it, we've got lots of these elements of our lives plugged in, so that you're hoping that they're all kind of powered up, they're all independent of each other, and they're all humming along nicely. But there are times, obviously, when one or more of those things can become unplugged. And naturally, your first response is to plug them all in, because let's face it, you're trying to also make space for yourself to have a life, not manage all these things all the time. But what happens is if too many things start kind of getting unplugged at once, then the space that you've made that you use often to kind of nurture and nourish yourself or to keep yourself centered, that can kind of shrink, and you can find that you're just running around in disaster control mode all the time. And then there can be that perfect point, it can go on for a while, but there's that point where the whole lot just collides. It just is just cataclysmic. And, you know, something happens in your relationship with your partner, something happens with your dog, something happens with your business, something happens financially, something happens, and it just goes ping, 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 ping. And then the whole lot all comes down like a house of cards. And that's the point. That's the juicy point that I'm talking about. If you've been there, you'll know when you hit that point, right? It's kind of, it's a game changer. Let's face it, it really is a game changer. It really does separate the sheep from the lambs, if that's how you'd like to put it. Well, that's how I'm putting it anyway. And that's when you really know if you've got your shit together or not. And often in that situation, you don't. And so you just kind of got to go in, you know, like just give into it and just go, right, what am I going to do? You know, you can cry and scream and freak out. The issue is, what I'm talking about today is quite often what you'll try and do is run outside of yourself to try and fix it. You'll try and grab someone, something. It could be anything. It could be a person, it could be, alcohol, it could be anything, and outside of yourself to fix it. Now, I'm not talking about going to a counsellor. If you're in deep freaking water and you need to go and see a counsellor, go and see a counsellor. But what I'm talking about is you can't take the counsellor home. Well, that would be a bit irregular, if you took the counsellor home. You can't take the counsellor home. So after you've done your session, you buy your Pat Malone, right? You're by yourself. So you start thinking, right, this is my ship. I got to steer it. So this is where independence comes in. This is where you keep coming back into yourself all the time. You keep coming back in and asking. Not the big story about, oh my God, what happened? Sure, there are times you need to do that, but you need to keep asking, because there are times when you're going to need to navigate this ship and this life, and you're going to need to make some decisions about what to do next. And coming back into yourself is the most empowering thing to do. It's the most empowering practice that you can do, even for the tiny, weeny little things, and then the big things. So today is all about independence, and then if you're wondering, well, how do I know? How do I know? Well, how does anyone else know? I mean, if you don't know, how does anyone else know? No one else knows you. No one. No one knows who you are. Not really. Not really, really. I mean, you might not think you know yourself, but that's why you're here, right? That's maybe you're really looking to get some insight. I know that I was looking for a lot more insight when I went through my big life change. So no one knows what your dreams are, or your beliefs, or your competencies, your abilities, your capabilities, your wisdom. No one knows your soul. No one knows your soul like you know your soul. No one knows your dreams. No one knows that voice that's coming through you that says, that just doesn't feel right to me. So you've got to start learning. You don't have to, but this is my suggestion. This is what worked for me. Start learning to listen to that soul voice, and it's guiding you. Don't go that way. Don't go that way. Start asking. Just start asking and start journaling on it. We were talking yesterday about journaling. Yesterday we were talking about, what do you want? Start writing in your journal, what do you want? Now, this is a bit interesting. I'd be interested to find out if what you were writing in your journal, that what you wanted, were you trying to plug things back in? Oh, I want something back, or I want this back, or I want to get my life back on exactly how I was and try and plug it all in? Or were you saying, actually, I think I'd like to really do something else. I think I would like to have a new partner, start a new job, start a new business, go on an adventure, start traveling, doing whatever. So that's actually a good lead in to what I'm thinking about. That would be a really good exercise for you today, is write down in your journal, what would my dream life look like? Because you can write your existence into reality, as Katrina Ruth, a favourite mentor of mine, says, by journaling. So why don't you start, if you had all the resources that you needed, if you had all of the, or if you had no responsibilities, all of the resources that you needed, all of the boundaries and the walls and everything taken down, and you could just go, right, this would be my dream life. Why don't you journal on that? Journal on that, and really describe what that might look like. Really get into it. What does it smell like? What music's playing? Do you need to travel in the air to get there? Do you need to have some particular person around you? Do you need to be practicing something? What would it look like? Where would you be living? Do you have a fabulous garden? Do you have no garden at all? Are you in a loft? Are you in New York? Are you at Aldinga? That's in South Australia. Where are you? And where does it take you in your head when you place yourself there in your mind and write that stuff out in your journal and really have fun with it. Yeah, and then we'll talk a bit more about that tomorrow and about what can be a really good, what really good conclusions. Well, don't think about conclusions when you're first starting to write it. Just write it. And it could be just really interesting to see how you feel when you're writing it. Do you feel really buoyant? Do you feel light? Notice your feelings as you're writing it. And the more you write about this particular life that you want, start writing down your feelings. Identify your feelings, put them in brackets, really excited, inspired, uplifted, motivated, heart starting to race. You start to chuckle to yourself, write some of these responses down. It's really interesting. Okay, that's enough for today. Thank you so much for joining me. And remember, change is opportunity. Grab it with both hands. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye for now.